Have you ever noticed sometimes the deepest impact is made not by presence, but by disappearance? You didn't scream, you didn't beg, you simply vanished, and in doing so, you removed the very thing her ego depended on, your attention. What most men don't realize is this: your silence, your absence, when done from inner strength, doesn't go unnoticed. It creates a rupture in her emotional rhythm, her nervous system. Once comforted by your availability, is now suspended in uncertainty. And it's not rejection she feels, it's withdrawal. When you walk away without fanfare, without explanation, without seeking closure, her mind doesn't settle, it spirals. She starts searching not for you, but for the emotional certainty your presence used to bring. And in that void, your image lingers longer than any final words could. This isn't about playing mind games. It's about reclaiming your role as the one who no longer needs to prove anything. When you stop chasing, you interrupt the script, and that interruption, that's what makes her crave you. Not because she lost you, but because she can't place you anymore. If you're done explaining your worth and ready to let your absence speak for itself, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. My silence is my message. Let's begin. Number 1. The silent power move. Right now, you may think silence means weakness. That said, pulling away or not defending yourself looks like surrender. But in truth, the most powerful men don't shout. They vanish. They say less. And that absence, calm, intentional, and unshaken, becomes a storm in someone else's mind. When you stop explaining, stop chasing, stop responding, something shifts. The game they thought they were playing with you collapses, because silence isn't emptiness. It's exposure. It forces the other person to confront something they were never prepared for. Your self-respect, your unwillingness to be kept as an option, your quiet decision to let go of being understood in favor of being free. From the Stoic lens, this is discipline in action. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and it is achieved by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." That includes whether someone values you, whether they reach out, and whether they regret their behavior. You don't control their guilt, you only control your gravity. So instead of speaking to be heard, you choose silence to be felt. Your absence becomes presence. The space where they once ignored your words now becomes the chamber where your echo lingers. You didn't beg them to listen, you left them with no choice but to hear you when you stopped talking. Practically, this means you stop reaching. You stop justifying your worth. You withdraw, not to punish, but to create clarity. And what happens? The illusions fall apart. The belief that you'd always be available, gone. The idea that they could disrespect you and still keep access to your warmth, shattered. They start asking questions they never asked when you were speaking. Why is he so quiet? Did I go too far? Is he really done? You become their mental mirror, reflecting not what they wanted to believe about you, but what they must now confront about themselves. Psychologically, this is disruption at its finest. People crave control, predictability, but your silence breaks that illusion. And in the absence of your energy, they are left not with closure, but with themselves. Their ego takes the first blow, their comfort takes second. And by the time regret kicks in, it's no longer your problem. Because you didn't leave to be chased. You left to protect your peace. If you've ever turned your silence into self-respect, speak this below. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my value. Number 2, the control illusion breaker. She thought she had time, that no matter how far she pushed, you'd wait, that no matter how cold she went, you'd warm the space again. You were steady, too steady, predictable, and in that predictability, She mistook your loyalty for weakness, but then you went silent, and suddenly the script collapsed. You see, silence doesn't just disrupt routine, it dismantles illusion. The illusion that you were always going to be there. That you'd keep knocking, checking in, offering your presence even when it was taken for granted. But Stoicism teaches that what we tolerate becomes our reality. And once you recognize that your presence had become an expectation, not a gift, you did what few men do, you stepped back. That silence wasn't revenge, it was a revelation. Because when someone believes they can pull you in and push you away at will, it's not affection, it's control. And when you stop responding, when your energy no longer bends to their emotions, they feel something they never expected from you. Distance. Not the kind that comes from anger, the kind that comes from clarity. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. You realize the game wasn't worth playing, the rules weren't yours, and instead of arguing, you exited, quietly, firmly, completely. And that's silence. It shattered the control, because control thrives on response. When she gets no reply, when her tests go unanswered, she doesn't get certainty, she gets confusion. Why isn't he reacting? Has he stopped caring? Has he moved on? Her sense of power was tied to your predictability. Now, with no reaction, no access, she begins to lose grip not on you, but on the narrative she told herself about you. The practical shift is simple. You stop performing. You stop proving. You stop participating in conversations that were never truly about mutual respect, and you begin to walk firm, inward, clean. You stop being the man who can be summoned. You become the man whose absence is felt more than his presence is respected, psychologically. This reversal is potent. People don't panic when you argue, they panic when you disappear. And that panic is rooted in a fear far deeper than loss. It's the fear that maybe they no longer have control. Maybe the leash snapped. Maybe the power shifted. And in truth, it did. If you've ever broken someone's illusion of control by choosing your silence, speak this below. I stopped being predictable and started being powerful. Number 3, the mirror. They didn't ask for. Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the birth of reflection. When you go quiet, you don't just step away from the conversation, you force the other person into one they can't avoid with themselves. That's the power of self-restraint. You didn't stop speaking because you were weak. You stopped because you realized talking wouldn't bring truth, only more noise. And so, in stillness, you handed them something they never asked for, a mirror. A reflection of how they treated you, a reflection of what they dismissed, a reflection of what they may have lost. In that space, their own mind becomes the antagonist. They begin to revisit every moment, every ignored message, every delayed reply, every half-hearted effort. You're not there anymore to distract them from their own behavior. So their conscience takes over. Epictetus reminds us. It is not he who reviles or strikes you who insults you, but your opinion that these things are insulting. When you go silent, you leave no insults, only gaps, and the mind abhors gaps. So it fills them with questions, with doubt, with what-ifs, and each question paints you bigger, brighter, clearer. You didn't manipulate this, you allowed it. You respected their free will by stepping back. You left them with their own narrative. And without your voice to drown it out, it got louder, not yours. Theirs, the practical move. No closure texts, no dramatic statements, just absence, just your focus shifting inward, letting your life continue forward while they stand frozen in mental rewind. The more they analyze, the more they begin to feel the weight of what they never really processed before. You weren't loud, but you were present, and now you're not. Psychologically, this creates a tension they can't resolve, because you didn't give them a villain, you gave them a question. Was I the one who pushed him away? Did I take him for granted? Did I fail to see what he really offered? That emotional unease, that's the signature of being unforgettable. Stoicism calls this the virtue of discipline. You don't insert yourself into someone else's realization. You let it form naturally, quietly. And when it finally lands, you'll be gone not bitter, not waiting, but better. If you've ever become someone's lesson by choosing silence over closure, speak it now. I didn't give them closure. I gave them the mirror. Number 4, the silent strike to their ego. There's a kind of silence that doesn't whisper, it strikes. Not at the heart, at the ego. Because when someone is used to being chased, praised, and prioritized, your quiet withdrawal isn't just confusing, it's threatening. It doesn't feel like distance. It feels like a demotion. They didn't expect it from you. They thought you'd stay available, emotionally loyal, even when they gave you nothing back. Your attention was their oxygen, your validation, their mirror. But when you went silent, you didn't just disappear. You dismantled the illusion that they were irreplaceable. This is where the ego begins to unravel. Not because you said anything cruel, but because you stopped saying anything at all. From the Stoic perspective, this isn't punishment, it's power. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And when someone tests you, mocks your presence, or minimizes your value, the most devastating response is none, because in that restraint, you prove that their behavior no longer moves you. That's what breaks the ego, irrelevance. The moment they realize your world doesn't orbit their approval anymore, they panic. Their identity, which once rested on being the center of attention, begins to crack. Why hasn't he called? Is he really gone? Has he stopped needing me? They thought they were the prize. But your silence reframes the story. Maybe you were. The practical shift is in action. You don't respond to bait. You don't re-explain your value. You don't feed the ego that once fed on your energy. You detach with quiet dignity. And that dignity becomes the most jarring contrast they've ever felt because they expected drama, not distance. Psychologically, the ego is addicted to confirmation. When you stop giving it, the withdrawal hits hard. They may lash out, act indifferent, or pretend they don't care, but none of that touches you, because your silence isn't about them. It's about you choosing not to serve what no longer serves you. That is emotional sovereignty. And here's the beauty. Your absence becomes the mirror they never asked for. They begin to see their behavior not through your words, but through your exit. Your lack of reaction becomes the consequence they never saw coming, and in that quiet reckoning, you leave a mark far deeper than any argument ever could. If you've ever shattered someone's ego by choosing calm over chaos, write this below. I didn't hurt their ego. I let it collapse under silence. Number 5, the chaos they created, now turned inward. At first, they didn't notice the shift. You were just a little quieter, slower to respond, not as eager. Then came the silence, not out of anger, but clarity. And that silence, like a storm with no thunder, unsettled them in ways they couldn't explain. They started checking their phone more, wondering what you were thinking, feeling a tension they had once made you carry. This is emotional whiplash, but not yours, theirs. Because when you stop participating in their emotional loop, their own inconsistency turns against them, the warm and cold routine they used to keep you off balance. Now it plays out in reverse. They don't know how to hold still anymore. Should I reach out? Should I wait? What if he's done for good? Your silence becomes the new rhythm and they can't dance to it. This is where Stoic strength becomes transformational. You don't match their chaos with chaos. You meet it with stillness. Epictetus taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself," and you, now anchored in discipline, are no longer moved by mood swings or emotional bait. You've stepped off the stage and they're still performing to an empty room. They thought their inconsistency gave them power, that pulling away would draw you closer, that acting cold would spark your warmth. But when your silence remains, when your energy no longer plays along, they lose something far more valuable than control. They lose emotional certainty. Psychologically, this is destabilizing, because when someone's identity is built on being the one pursued, being met halfway or more, your withdrawal is a rupture. It's not just absence, it's an imbalance. And in that imbalance, the need to resolve it becomes an obsession. But you don't resolve it. You let them feel it. That's the lesson. When someone uses instability to test you, don't answer with confusion. Answer with consistency. Not the kind that chases, but the kind that holds the boundary, holds the silence, holds your self-worth. And when they try to re-engage through their usual tactics, half-hearted texts, mixed signals, sudden warmth, you don't respond with need. You respond with neutrality, because you now know if someone needs to confuse you to keep you, they were never keeping you at all. Your silence is no longer a pause. It's a boundary. If you've ever stopped dancing to emotional games and watched the game collapse, write this below. I didn't play harder, I stopped playing entirely. Number 6, the fear you ignite when you say nothing. At first, your silence was just silence, a gap, a pause, a space that used to be filled with your presence, your words, your reliability. But as time passed, that space didn't stay empty. It started to speak, and what it said was far louder than anything you could have texted or explained. It said, "I'm no longer where you left me." That's when the fear sets in. Not fear of you, fear of being replaced, of being forgotten, of watching the one person who used to wait, who used to ask, who used to show up now, rise somewhere else, with someone else, without explanation, because when you go quiet and start growing, they don't imagine you hurting, they imagine you evolving, laughing more, meeting new people, finding someone who actually sees your value without needing to lose you first. And that image, that unknown, it begins to torment them more than any goodbye ever could. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Your greatest power isn't found in what you prove to others. It's in how you live without needing their validation. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." And now, your absence isn't just painful, it's valuable, because they finally estimate you as something they might lose. The shift happens not when you try to make them regret, but when you stop performing entirely. You stop giving updates. Stop checking in. Stop reacting. You build. You glow. You reconnect with your rhythm. And while you're planting new seeds, they're stuck watching the field they once owned turn into a garden they can't enter. Psychologically, this triggers the FOMO effect, fear of missing out. But deeper, it's the fear of realizing that what they once ignored is now being appreciated elsewhere. That which they had access to without effort is now reserved for someone who actually gives effort. And they'll never know for sure. That mystery, the gap between what they know and what they imagine, drives obsession. Your silence becomes their story. And every possibility that you're happy without them becomes another cut to their ego. But you're no longer concerned with proving anything, because you understand that your evolution is the loudest answer. If you've ever let your silence spark their fear of being replaced, say it below. I didn't need revenge. I became what they can't reach. Number 7, The guilt that echoes in your absence. In the beginning, they didn't think twice. They brushed off your effort, downplayed your consistency, treated your care like background noise, always there, always reliable. But when you withdrew, you didn't take just your presence, you took the comfort they'd come to mistake for permanence. And then the guilt crept in, not immediately. Regret doesn't move fast, it moves quietly, like a shadow cast over memories they once ignored. A laugh they dismissed, a text they ghosted, a moment where they sensed your disappointment and chose pride instead of presence. And now, with you gone, those moments replay uninvited, relentless, sharp, because silence doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers reminders. You had something rare. You didn't see it. Now you feel it. This is what Stoicism teaches at its core. That by letting go of control, by detaching with dignity, we leave space for truth to echo louder than our words ever could. Seneca once said, "No man was ever wise by chance," and your silence, your refusal to beg for recognition, was not accidental. It was wisdom in motion. You didn't guilt them with speeches. You didn't list the ways they failed. You just disappeared. And that disappearance didn't erase you, it made you unforgettable. Because people remember differently when they have to remember alone. The practical move was simple. No parting message, no emotional confession. You left the unfinished sentences hanging in the air. You left them to interpret the silence. And that interpretation became their punishment. Not because you meant to punish, but because you meant to protect your peace, psychologically. Guilt is retroactive awareness. It's the mind finally acknowledging what the heart was too proud to feel. And when someone has lost the privilege of your presence, guilt settles in, not always as apology, but as obsession. Was I too harsh? Did I misread him? Was he really the one who saw me? And the most haunting part? You never answered. They reach for memories to soothe the guilt, but those memories now carry weight. You didn't try to change them. You gave them the opportunity to see themselves. And if they're honest, they'll see what you gave and what they didn't return. If you've ever walked away and let your absence deliver the lesson, speak this below. I didn't create their guilt. I gave them the silence to feel it. Number 8. The mystery they can't replace. When you went silent, you didn't just leave space, you became it. Not a void of desperation, but a void of presence. And that void didn't shrink over time, it grew. Because with every moment you didn't reach out. You stopped being familiar, you became rare. And the rarest people aren't forgotten, they're mythologized. They used to know what to expect from you, your rhythm, your warmth, the subtle ways you cared, even when they didn't reciprocate. But now, you've vanished from the script. You're no longer the one who lingers, you've become the one they wonder about. That's the paradox of silence. It doesn't erase you, it elevates you. You're no longer easy to read. Your absence becomes your aura, and in that aura lives every what if they never dared ask. Did I misjudge him? Is he happier now? Did someone else notice what I ignored? These questions don't fade, they circle. Because you gave no answers, no final scene, and no explanation, you became the unfinished book they keep rereading, hoping for a new ending. And this is where Stoic strength sharpens your edge. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And while they used to color their world with your reliability, now they're left painting with shadows, memories, projections, regrets, all because you stopped giving yourself away. You stopped letting your worth be accessible to someone who only valued it in hindsight. In practice, this means you moved forward, but quietly. You didn't announce your growth. You didn't flaunt your evolution. You lived it. And in that contrast between what they thought they knew and who you've now become, you created the one thing no attention seeker can replicate: mystery, psychologically. This triggers what researchers call open-loop tension. The mind hates unresolved endings. And when you leave without closure, without collapse, they don't just remember you, they obsess over the version of you they never truly got to hold. They look at your silence and see power, and they look in the mirror and wonder what made you stop offering it. That is how your value multiplies in absence. If you've ever become unforgettable by refusing to be predictable, write this below: I didn't fade away. I became the mystery they can't replace. Number 9. The doubt that rewrites their decision. At the time, they were sure you'd always be there, sure your feelings made you predictable, sure that letting go of you wouldn't cost them much. You weren't loud, you weren't demanding, you just showed up. And when someone gets used to unconditional presence, they confuse it for permanence. So when you finally went silent, truly silent, they didn't panic right away. Not until the space you left stopped feeling like peace and started feeling like loss. Not until your absence stopped being a choice they made and became a decision they questioned. And that doubt, it's not fleeting, it lingers, quietly rewriting the story they once told themselves about you. You didn't try to make them regret. You didn't try to be missed. You simply stopped handing your value to someone who didn't know what to do with it. That choice alone rewired everything. Because silence, when rooted in self-respect, doesn't just disrupt a pattern, it redefines it. Stoicism calls this the act of choosing your response rather than reacting to emotion. As Epictetus said, people are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. And the view they now take of you, different, sharper, elevated. Not because you changed for them, but because you stopped shrinking for them. The man who used to explain himself now says nothing. The man who used to check in now walks away. The man who used to try no longer tries at all. Psychologically, this creates dissonance. The brain, convinced it made the right choice, starts to question, what if I misjudged him? What if I misunderstood the silence? What if he was exactly what I needed? But I was too blind to see it. That's not regret from pain, it's regret from clarity. And clarity always comes too late for those who dismiss what's rare when it's still present. You didn't chase. You didn't collapse. You chose to be misunderstood in the short term in order to be respected in the long run. That is Stoic courage. And now, they carry the consequence not in shame, but in doubt. The kind that resurfaces in quiet moments, in old photos, in places where your memory lingers. Not as a mistake, but as the right thing lost too soon. If you've ever let your silence force someone to reconsider their decision, speak it now. I didn't beg to be chosen. I became the reason they questioned their choice. Number 10. The silence that speaks louder than closure. In a world obsessed with answers, silence is rebellion. It's the space that refuses to explain itself, the breath between what was said and what was meant. And when used with clarity, not ego, it becomes the most powerful message you'll ever send. I respect myself more than I need you to understand me. You didn't go quiet to win. You didn't pull away to punish. You did it because you finally realized that peace doesn't come from being heard, it comes from being whole. People mistake noise for strength, but strength is what you showed when you stopped showing up where you weren't valued. When you stopped trying to teach someone your worth and let the absence of your energy teach it for you. That kind of silence is not emptiness, it's presence, sharpened by discipline, Marcus Aurelius said. The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do only what you do. And what you did was walk away with your dignity intact. No drama, no spectacle, just the quiet revolution of self-respect. This silence didn't just affect them, it transformed you. It pulled you inward. forced you to rebuild from stillness. You stopped performing. You stopped proving. And somewhere in that sacred quiet, you became the man they couldn't shake, not because you haunted them, but because you healed without needing their permission, psychologically. This final act is what imprints you deepest, because unlike anger or closure, which satisfy the mind, silence leaves the door slightly open, not for them to return, but for them to realize what they walked away from. And you don't wait, you don't rewind, you move forward with less weight and more wisdom. Because that silence wasn't just a message to them, it was a contract with yourself. One that said, I will never lower my voice again just to stay in someone's story. If you've ever chosen your peace over their closure, say this below. My silence wasn't goodbye, it was a boundary. You thought disappearing would make you forgettable, but instead, it made you unforgettable. Because when you said nothing, you gave her mind space to hear what your presence had been quietly saying all along. She's not haunted by what you said. She's haunted by what you didn't. No closure, no drama, just absence with a purpose. She didn't expect the silence. She didn't prepare for the man who walked away with peace instead of protest. And now that man lives not in her inbox, but in her memory. If you're ready to keep building that unshakable version of yourself, like this video, subscribe and comment. I choose to walk in power, not noise, because sometimes the most unforgettable thing you can do is leave without a single word.